standing here at the Kensington Runestone Museum in one of the outer buildings. You can see behind me a 3/4 size replica of an actual Viking ship. This is the type of ship that would have navigated the rivers in the interior continent if the Norsemen did, of course, come here. In 1898, the runestone was discovered near Kensington, Minnesota in a township called Solum. At that time, the person that discovered it, Ohman, transcribed the runestone and sent it off to the University of Minnesota. But he mistranscribed it, so immediately it was deemed a hoax. It took 100 years for people to actually examine the stone and make an accurate copy for interpretation. So it is unfortunate that people thought it was a hoax because the family was ridiculed and harassed, but also because we missed out on the history for that much time. So mainly the stone is thought of as a hoax because the characters that were engraved on the stone were thought to be from a different era, or the actual language on the stone was thought to be in parts more modern. But over the years, the stone has been investigated. First, a geologist and scholar examined the stone in terms of its weathering and found it to be 500 years old. And I can't remember if that was 1901 or 1960, but it was after 1900. So I guess more on that later. But also, the mica on the stone shows how old it is, because once the mica wears off of this type of stone, we know that it's at least 200 years old, and that is the case on the stone and in the area where there are the engravings. Also, the runic characters were thought to go out of use by the year 1300, and this stone is dated 1362. But what we know now is that in Gotland, which is an island off of Sweden, the Goths used the runic symbols until the year 1500. And on this journey, if the stone is telling the truth, there were 8 Goths and 27 Norwegians. So also the mix between the Swedish and Norwegian people could have actually created a different type of language on the stone as well. The dotted R is another character that people thought was not in existence, but in examining ruins in Gotland, we now know that the dotted R existed a long time ago and at the time that the stone was engraved. There also is a hooked X. Now, the hooked X, the hook is on there for symbolism, and we know that just certain factions of people or certain small groups would use the hooked X. So it's very unlikely that Olaf Ohman knew about this at that time in history. Also, there are many other pieces of corroborating evidence that support that Norsemen or the Vikings were here way before Christopher Columbus. We know for certain that the Vikings were here in 1160 because there was a settlement in northern Newfoundland, and so that's quite a big dig with quite a big outcome. So in terms of the amount of artifacts, so we know that they were on this continent in 1160. We also know that there was a documented expedition led by a man named Knudsen that left Scandinavia in 1354, I believe, to come here to explore. So we also know that there was an expedition that included that mix of men that were coming this way. So is the Kensington Runestone real? I don't know. Is it a hoax? I don't know. One thing for sure, Olaf Ohman never ever tried to exhibit it or make money off of it. I also don't know why a man would mistranscribe something if he were trying to make money off of it or portray it as authentic. So it's a puzzle, to be sure. And at this point, we don't know. Also, recently, an actor by the name of Peter Stormare did a series on the Kensington Runestone, and Scott Wolter, who's a geologist from the Twin Cities, also re-examined the stone in terms of where the roots of the tree actually carved into the stone. So he actually looked there and did some new studies with new instruments we didn't have until now, and found that at least for 20 years that root had carved its way into the stone. And 20 years before that, Ohman was not a part of this country and was not here. He hadn't left Sweden yet. And we know that the tree was roughly 30 years old. So you put all that together, and you know, it's looking more and more like it's authentic, although we don't know for sure. So this remains a puzzle, and I am hoping that people continue to investigate it. So how did early explorers survey, follow maps, leave a trail for others, or leave an item in a designated spot, or relocate an item? Well, let's see. Did they have little wheels that they rolled around to see how far the distance is on ground? No. Did they have lasers? Nope. Did they have GPS? No. Surveying equipment? No. Airplanes? No. LiDAR? No. Ground penetrating radar? Nope. A compass? Well, not a magnetic one. They had a makeshift, but not magnetic. And I'll explain more about that later. Did they have cameras? Nope. Cell phones? Nope. Drones? No. So how did they navigate, explore, and mark off territory? Well, I'm going to move this up just a little bit here. What they actually used were water depth, speed, charting a course with latitude and a very rudimentary compass. They tracked latitude by looking at the height of the sun, and they might have used a sun compass to do this, but a sun compass isn't magnetic. It's really a disc that looks like this, and maybe even more of a rounder disc. I'm not sure, but they would take a look at where the horizon was and how much of a shadow it cast. And so that's pretty rudimentary. And then, of course, if there was no sun and it was cloudy out that day, they were at a loss. So some of them attempted to use sunstones. So they would hold up a mineral toward the light, and it would polarize the light so they could still see it on an instrument such as this. So very rudimentary, except that there was an exception, it seems. And that exception is that they were able to make stone holes in glacial boulders that they could relocate. And they did this in a certain way. They used something called sacred geometry, which I'm going to talk about. And once they used sacred geometry, they were able to have a grid system of interlocking lines. Around Minnesota and the central Midwest, there are mysterious holes chiseled in glacial boulders. At first, people felt they were left over from farmers who had chiseled a hole for blasting and then changed their mind. But as more and more were discovered, this theory seemed faulty. The next theory was that during the 1100s, when the water level was higher, the holes were made for docking boats. This theory also lost credibility over time. Many now think that early explorers hand-chiseled or pounded a hole into boulders to mark a trail, survey land, or to mark the location of an object. It is likely that one person made the hole while the rest of the group went on, catching up later. Explorers used geometry to make a grid system of interlocking lines or to triangulate rocks to point to a certain location. Okay, I have something to show you here on this diagram. So this is a rough diagram of the Ohman farm, which is the discovery site of the Kensington Runestone, of course. And what you have here is a diagram that shows that this way would be where the farmhouse and barn would be. Then you have your road coming in, passing this hill, and going here to where there are some glacial boulders with stone holes. So there are actually many stone holes on this property, and Olaf Ohman has said that he certainly didn't put these holes in the stones. What you have here are a bunch of stones here which we think were moved in order to plow the fields. So these seem to have all been moved, so they're not much good to us, but there's indication to believe that this stone was not moved, this stone was not moved, this stone was not moved, and that these two were not moved. So what does that tell us? If we try to apply some of the geometry that was used hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, we can try to triangulate these stones to see if it gives us any indication of a location that the stones were meant to tell us. So if you look at it, I believe Scott Wolter did this figuring, but if you look at it, if you draw from here to here, here to here, and do I draw from here to here? I think I forgot something. I think I forgot something, didn't I? Yeah. Yep, I did. Okay, let's draw from here to here too. See what happens. So it works out much better when other people do this that are drawing straight lines and such. But what they discovered was that the lines actually intersect here. And of course my holes, I'm guessing where they were. I mean, I just kind of drew it as close as I could. So, but we're thinking that, or I shouldn't say listen to me pat myself on the back when I've done nothing. That they intersect here, which would seem to indicate that if the stones were telling us where the Kensington Runestone was buried so that someone would relocate it years after, they would use these stones, draw these angles to see where they would triangulate, and one of the triangulations lands here. The current discovery site is right there, and as you have heard or will hear in this tape, psychic Debbie Griggs believed it was not here, but that it was you know, either this way or this way. So this is the hill that they call Runestone Hill, and this is maybe where Peter Stormare and Elroy and their archaeology team were digging to look for artifacts. I'm really not sure where up on this hill they were looking, but it seems to indicate, if this is right, that the actual discovery site was further up the hill. This right here is just a little parking lot where you can get out and look at the stone hole, the stone holes in the glacier rock. So just showing you just one theory about the stone holes that are located on the Ohman farm. I think there's 12 to 14 total. There's a beautiful diagram of this up at the interpretive center there. That's much more exacting than this. But it's very curious that so many stones, 14 stone holes, were found on his property. And why is that? It just seems rather odd. So I will let you be the judge of this. Okay, yeah, this one's got a hole in it too, Debbie. Yes. Right there. I wonder if it has any others. For some reason, there's a... I don't know why all the stones in here have the holes in them, but they think it's from the when the Vikings were most likely here. So when Debbie and I first came here, we didn't understand why this memorial is here, but now we know, because 2 of the stones out of about 12 that had the holes in them are here. And the rest are somewhere over here. There's like 12 of them. But somehow I think we're not gonna be walking that far today. This is Olaf's land. Isn't it beautiful? It is beauteous, very beauteous. And there's our other Viking stone.
What is this? See, look at here.
You thought somebody wrote in this?
Yeah, because look at the markings here. Doesn't that look like the X? And then there's the. Doesn't that look like an X?
Oh my gosh!
Doesn't it?
Absolutely. It looks like the X with the hook,
which I have on my hand.
Oh, that's pretty weird. So, let's look at this page. Let's get it down here where we want it. Okay. You see, only state-of-the-art things here for you. But sacred geometry. So there's Diane's knowledge of sacred geometry, and then there's the basic knowledge of geometry, and the relationship to each other is this. Diane's knowledge of sacred geometry is much less than the basic knowledge of sacred geometry, but I'm going to do my best and explain to you what it is all about. So what is sacred geometry? Sacred geometry assigns symbolic and sacred meanings to certain geometric shapes and geometric proportions, and it's the proportions that I believe I'm going to focus on today. So where did it come from? It dates back to the ancient Sumerians of 5000 BC. And if you've ever studied the Sumerians, they are very interesting to study, because in so many ways they had civilization that does not seem likely for that year. They pass it on to the Romans, who pass it on to the Danes in Denmark, who pass it on to Iceland, which is of course where the Norsemen lived, and the Vikings. So one of the keys, and again, my knowledge is less than a good basic knowledge of sacred geometry. But the real beauty of this method that I'm going to show you is that the distance here, and this is what was passed down from the Sumerians, the distance was 20, or they use 40, or 80, 160, or 340. And you can break this down to feet, yards, whatever. But normally it was feet or miles. And it's important to note that after the 1500s, the Queen of England changed the measurement of the mile and added 280 feet to each mile, so you always have to consider that. So when I look at this, I'm wondering if this is wrong, although I did get it from a good source, because it looks like you're going, you're doubling each one, and then when you get here, double 160 would be 320, but it says 340 in my source. But now I'm going to show you how this really can be applied, and how it may have been applied in terms of the Kensington Runestone. So you can ignore this little picture over here for now. So what you see here, of course, Minnesota, Lake Superior, North Dakota, South Dakota, Canada. And again, I've got the markings up here to show you what our options are. So what drew people's attention to this was that 3 cairns were found in Whetstone Valley in South Dakota. Now, as long as any American, or Caucasian American rather, has been there, we don't know where they came from. They are like 8-9 feet tall. They've withstood every storm, and they seem to be dating back, or look like they're dating back, to the cairns that are in Iceland, and look like the ones that are in Iceland. So someone thought this was very suspicious. Also, in this entire area, they found about 112, something like that, stone holes that seem to be also telling a story. So the way it works is that you apply the sacred geometry. And so something is either 20 feet, 40 feet, 80 feet, 160, or 340. So what they found was that if they took this 160 feet here, there seemed to be some other indication of a stone hole or something that was present. So what I'm going to do, if I can get the right pen here, I am going to draw a ruler that will represent, I believe it's 160 feet from here to here. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay. So I'm not sure if the men that would have done this would have walked this way first, or whether they would have started with this, which is perhaps a more exact measurement. So what they did is they then took this and followed an angle to the next point, which was the exact angle of the summer solstice, and they would go from the marking point by the 3 cairns. They would use the angle of the summer solstice as it rose. So, and remember, we're either going to go 20, 40, 80, 160, or 340. And I don't know, I mean, at the time, they knew which one they were dealing with. But what we're seeing here is that it would have been 160. So we're going to take that, we're going to draw it, but not go forever. We're just going to go to 160 miles. Then what they did is, again, I'm not sure which of these 2 lines they did first or surveyed first. Then, and maybe they came over here then and established this one, and then the next one I'm going to show you. So then they would chart another course based on the winter solstice and the angle of the winter solstice. So I'm going to do that, and again, I'm going to do it by 160 because that's what we found means something here. So then you have these 2 lines. Then they would draw perfect east-west. So we'll do that. And again, we'll focus on 160 miles. And then north-south, 160 miles. I'm actually not doing, I made a mistake. That'll happen because I've never done this before, ever. I haven't practiced or anything. But this actually goes down to there. Okay. Well, yeah. I think then what my mistake tells me is that then they would go a certain distance and then do the other winter solstice line. So then what you have here is, if you look, then just because geometric shapes were sacred, they could draw it out like this. Not draw it, but they recognize this as sacred if they could do a perfect geometric shape. I don't know how mine will turn out. We're gonna see here what it looks like when I'm all done. And apparently they had a certain angle they followed here to make sure this worked. I don't know if I have enough room to get around my makeshift camera here to make this work. Oh, here comes a train. Perfect timing. So if you look here, I believe, I'm kind of guessing here, but I believe then the distance between each one of these would have been 80 miles because it's half of 160, but I'm not sure. So this would show you one method that they would use to mark out territory, designate an area, or leave something, plan for a building, relocate something, or how they would just generally survey an area if they were to be the first explorers, because they want to be able to make it so that when they come back, they can find the place. Well, if you look at the 3 cairns here and you look at these points, many of these have markers or the stone holes to mark them. And within this circle, there's about 111 stone holes marking. And if you remember from maybe what I said before in this video, is that the way they theorized it worked is that they would find a location, they would take their instrument, which was many times triangle shaped, or they would hand chisel with just a chisel, kind of a triangle shaped hole, which would be the size of a quarter in a hole. And that way, if they kind of use all their basic instruments and kind of narrow it down to there, it was like following breadcrumbs and they knew where they were. So what we found at all these locations is that there's some sort of indication with many of them that they were marked. But also, if you take a look at this based on these 3 cairns, guess what this is right there? That is where the Kensington Runestone was discovered. So that is Runestone Hill. It's not just the Ohman Farm. It's not just Kensington, Minnesota. It is Runestone Hill. So it's just very interesting and intriguing when you take a look at this.
The Kensington Runestone. But Spirit told me it was further. It was down that way. When we were here the last time, we found this, got excited because the animal showed me where to go. But when I went into the car, that's when I saw the apparition. And I'd like to show you where that apparition was. Let's come on, follow me. See this beautiful tree here? I saw him standing like this, very straight like a soldier. But then all of a sudden, I thought to my mind, I thought he saluted or went like this. And then I saw a video of Scott Walter, who said that the X with a hook means Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and the child, and that they would go like this and have the thumb out and stand really, it would be the X. So maybe that is what the child was trying to show me. I feel like it was the child that committed suicide. It was in a uniform. It was right here. Standing right here. So I feel that the stone was found here and that they're not telling exactly where it was found, because maybe there's more things here. I don't know. That's up to you, what you're thinking. Here, this is kind of bare. This is up a mound. What was here? A tree? A stone? Maybe that's where the tree was. But all I know is I saw the apparition and I feel like he's trying to give us information. And I hope he gives us more information. That's all I can say. That's not the spot. This isn't the spot. That they measured it wrong, and that it was that they measured it through feet when they're supposed to measure it through meters. And that's what. And we think it was William because of the.
Talk about that for a minute. We were here last time and we had the obelisk going, and
the obelisk going, and it said William. After I saw the apparition, I was getting in the car, and I saw the apparition, and I saw the soldier, and saw the thing, and him saying, "It's not. That's not where we found it. We found it down further, because of the feet and the meters." And he said, basically, he was telling me that we didn't find. We have not found the correct space yet. So, I don't know.
And I think the other words in the obelisk were blackened heart, and hung.
And we know that 2 of Olaf's children's, I think he had 6 or 9. Some say he had 9, some say he had 6. I know that a daughter committed suicide and a son committed suicide.
Yeah, because of the shame they felt about being accused of faking
that they
the
wrote the
runestone.
characters. But one thing that I've heard is that on this ruined stone is that there's dots on the ruined stone on the R, and it comes from the town of the island of, what was it again, Diane? Goth Island?
Gotland,
Gotland. And they,
which is Sweden.
which is Sweden, but it would have the dots on the R, and the historians didn't find that out until 1935. So how would Olaf put the dots on the R if it wasn't found until 1935? So there's a bunch of things. The ones that don't believe in them, it's like they're not giving us evidence of why it's not true, but we're giving them plenty of evidence of why it is true. So it's all in everybody's thoughts. I feel that a lot of people don't want it to be true because history would have to be extremely changed. And I say, let's embrace it. Let's go forward. Let's find all these things. Like up there, we had stones with those holes in it. Why would he do that? Do you know what I mean? So, and there's a lot of other ruined stones, and ruins means mystery. So mystery stones, there's a lot of mystery stones around North America that is being found.
So what are other theories as to the origin of the Kensington Runestone? There are several parties or people who may have had some motivation or who could have placed the stone for an entirely different reason. First, countries competing for the American territories in the 1500s and 1600s, maybe even the 1700s, may have, for whatever reason, wanted people to think that the Norsemen were here first. I'm not sure what advantage that would give any of these countries, but it is a thought. The Hudson Bay Company had some strong ties to the early settlers in Douglas County, where the Kensington Runestone was discovered. The county was in fact named for a man named Douglas, who was either owner or had heavy financial interests in the Hudson Bay Company. Also, there was a family with the last name of Hill who lived within 20 miles of the discovery site. 30 years prior to the discovery, the Hill family was there and also had some ties to the Hudson Bay Company and had many ties to government and to Washington, D.C. They also had knowledge of runes and showed this in how they portrayed a university that I believe they founded. If they didn't start it, they definitely had strong ties and decided on a logo that had some runes involved. Other theories have to do with the way the runestone was made. Some people think that there were two writers because the writing on the front of the stone as compared to the side seems to look different in terms of how clean the numbers are or the slant or size of the numbers. So some people think maybe there were two writers that did it on the same day, or there was one writer who did the front, and many hundreds of years later, someone else put the date on the side. I'm not sure what this means in terms of whether or not it supports that Norsemen discovered the Kensington Runestone, but it is interesting. People also feel that the story on the stone is not as important as the numbers within. I tend to agree with this. It seems like a lot of work to chisel a story about men who died on your journey and then to take the trouble to bury it. There are several numbers located within the text, and I do believe that these numbers could indicate something important. Also, there was a practice in those days of encoding the author's name into the text, and this was done into the Kensington Runestone. There are films that explain what you need to look for, but the name IVAR is in the stone if you look at this coating. So if a name is encoded in the Kensington Runestone, why not something else? The Freemasons making and burying the stone was also a popular theory, and to some degree maybe yet today. A well-known local surveyor was a Freemason, and he was the head of the Minnesota Cryptic Rite Freemasons. He was fascinated by numbers. Being that the location of the Kensington Runestone was centralized to the west and east coast, as well as the border of Mexico, Freemasons may have considered it to be a sacred spot. The numbers on the Kensington Runestone are the same numbers that are used in a document called the Beale Papers. The Beale Papers seem to spell out a treasure and where it was located. It was theorized to be written by a Freemason, if not several Freemasons. Another thing to look at is that people take angles and they connect Kensington with Oak Island and the settlement in Newfoundland of the Vikings, but they also connect it to the Newport Tower. Now, the Newport Tower in Rhode Island, I don't know how much you've heard about it, but if you look in Wikipedia, it says that people think it was made by the Vikings in like 1100, something really close to 1100. And they think it was maybe astronomical in nature, but you'd have to read about it. I don't really know, but basically it's a tower that has, these I don't know what you want to call them, pillars and the openings in the wall. And then in many of these structures, there's a keystone, and the keystone is like an oval-shaped rock that's put over an arch. And there's arches, I think, in all of these, but again, this is bird's eye view, so I'm not really sure how to describe it. But the keystone in relation to one of the true west, northeast, or in relation to something regarding sacred geometry, you can map out that it might be pointing to something else. So in here we have a 17 degrees difference between, I believe, the west, the true west, and here is where they placed the keystone. Now, mind you, they could have placed it anywhere, but they didn't. They placed it here. And if you map that out and you draw it across a real map, and you map out that angle from the keystone, what it actually lines up with exactly is Runestone Hill in Kensington. So I don't know if they had a plan to go there, or if this was here first and then they built this to show, okay, you get out the ship here and you got to head 17 degrees west in this direction. I don't know, but it's all theory. It's all you can't, we weren't there. There were no video cameras. I don't know what they really did, but it's just very intriguing. So, another thing that's intriguing is that, some people take the date on the Kensington Runestone, and first of all, they say, oh, that should have been Roman numerals. Well, actually not really. They're Arabic numerals. That's what we call all of our numbers today. The Arabics added a 0, and they had the number digits as we are familiar with them. Well, when all the Europeans got into the Crusades, they learned about these Arabic numbers, which of course opened up the mathematic world because there was a 0 attached, and it was just much easier to work with. Well, some people say on the stone that, then it shouldn't have been Arabic numerals. It was 1362, but actually the Crusades were like, I think, done in 1160-ish. Don't quote me, but around there. So the introduction of Arabic numerals started around 1160. And so, and by 1500 or 1400, they were well in use. So, and again, I could be wrong because we know that this is who you're talking to here. But anyways, what's really cool about it, if you take the 1362, here's a little rough draft of Minnesota. Here's where Kensington roughly is. And you take Kensington to the easternmost part of the United States, it's 1362 miles. Take it from here to the most western part, up here anyway, 1362. Take it down to the very tip of that border, 1362. Take a protractor, and again, I'm not sure if this protractor idea fit better with miles before, as they were before the Queen changed them and added more feet or not. I don't know, but this is just interesting. So if you take a protractor, which I did not have, I just had a needle and a piece of wire and a pen, and you draw a circle, what they found is it really outlines this part of the U.S. and, you know, some of the main body here as it would have been explored coming in from this direction from Iceland. So interesting. This could be in support of the runestone having a secret code, which I do think it does. Or it could be in support of the fact that maybe the stone was done by the Freemasons, because they are the ones that would have had a lot of this information. So, but more on other theories later. Now I can let you go for my little history lesson. Maybe I should show you Scott Wolter's book too. So Scott Wolter is a geologist who wrote The Hooked X, Key to the Secret History of North America. And much of this information is in here. I should probably say who published this book. North Star Press of St. Cloud, where I'm kind of from. Okay. Well, okay, there you have it. So that's the Hooked X, and you can learn a lot more about it. There's also other books on the Kensington Runestone. But at this point, I will just end by saying that this is the greatest whodunit of all time, in my opinion.
My other thing, that this is my opinion and my point of view. I watched The Curse of Oak Island. I don't know if anybody else does. But when I watched Curse of Oak Island, Spirit said, look at the ley line of where this was found and where the Oak Island is. And I looked at it, and the ley line is straight across. So this town, Kensington, and Oak Island are on the same ley line. Then also they say that there's these characters in England, and I believe it's the Shepherd, like Castle Shepherd Monument. And they said the mileage from the Shepherd Monument to Oak Island is 2,810, something like that. So Spirit said, find out how many miles it is from Kingston to Oak Island. And it's like 2,208. Very, very close. Again, meters. We're going by feet, but it would have the same numbers.
Looking at all theories, there is not one that has been proven. The theory of the Freemasons or other later parties hoaxing the stone does not explain the dotted R, since this letter was not known to us or tied to history until fairly recently. The hooked X also does not appear to have been well known until recently. While it is possible that the stone's real purpose has not been identified, we also know for a fact that the Vikings settled in Newfoundland in the 1100s. They did have the knowledge, men, and the tools to travel to inland America. It is important to look at scientific evidence, yet it would be a mistake to cling to old stories just for the sake of clutching familiarity. I agree with Debbie Griggs. If it turns out that we need to rewrite our history, let's embrace it.